What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football playoff rankings, top 25 for week 13. As always, I got Ty joining me, our college analyst for basketball and football. But before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Just to join subscribers, we'll be doing an autograph item giveaway. All you have to do is be subscribed to be entered in that. But before we get into our top 25, we got to talk about dropping from the rankings. And it's just NC State this week after a poor showing. They had to fall up in the rankings, but we'll move to our others receiving votes and tie out of these five teams. Obviously, South Carolina had a big upset, but which of these teams, is kind of surprised that we're here through 11 weeks?
I mean, I gotta say South Carolina just because they have looked really bad in a couple games this year. I don't think anyone saw them even beating Tennessee, let alone putting up 63 points on them. This is a team that lost to Missouri at home. I think it was 23 to 10 earlier in the year, and now Spencer Rattler looked like Patrick Mahomes, but better against Tennessee. I mean, just completely lit them up. So I think they have to be the team that you have to keep an eye on outside of the rankings because now they go to Clemson, and you gotta at least think they have a chance in that game.
And then I'll let you start here at 25.
Yep, we got UCF here, a team that really looked like they were going to be that group of five team going to the Cotton Bowl at the end of the year, and then they lose to Navy at home. So that's their second really head scratching loss this year for a team that really should be 10-1. So a lot of question marks. They should get through USF, who I think has one, maybe two wins on the whole year, one win. So that should be a win, and they should get to 9-3. But I think they do need some help if they're going to get to the American Championship. So we'll see if that happens.
At 24, we got Texas, and we had them fall out last week. This week they're joining back in because they absolutely obliterated Kansas. And Quinn Ewers is the quarterback, but it was more on Bijan Robinson this week. The most pro-ready running back in the draft in the upcoming year had his game of the ages, 243 yards, 4 touchdowns, and they can still get to the Big 12 championship. They need Baylor. Obviously, they got Baylor this week, beat Baylor, and they need that team that they just absolutely mollywopped to go in and beat Kansas State in a rivalry game. And if that happens, this team could play spoiler and give TCU a run for their money, in which we saw a very close game. And don't expect, Texas to take that one lightly after they've already lost once to them. You don't want to lose to a team twice in a 12-game season.
All right, at 23, we have Coastal Carolina. Did not play last week because of the Virginia and everything going on that campus. They did not play that game, so they stay at 9-1. They go to James Madison this week, and a win there would put them in the Sun Belt Championship. And this team has just become one of the best group of five programs over the last 4 or 5 years. Obviously, they had that undefeated season in 2020. So this team just continues to put up 9, 10, even 11-win seasons. And I think they're going to be a force for the next few years.
22, we got Oregon State staying put. Took care of business against Arizona State, ran for 4 touchdowns. And the running backs, obviously Damian Martinez had a good day. But now you get Oregon at home, battle of, who's going to win, the state of Oregon for at least another 365 days. And if Oregon State wants to win this game, they're going to have to somehow, some way find a way to get it done on the ground because Oregon's front is very good at stopping the run. And if they don't have a run, then you're going to see this Oregon State team struggle. And more than likely, Bo Nix will probably throw for at least 400 on him.
At 21, we have Ole Miss, who really got blown out by Arkansas. It was not anywhere near as close as that final score in a game they trailed 42-6 in the third quarter. So really disappointing performance. This team obviously had a couple duds of performances this year, but they had a really good chance to get to 10-2. And, that's a good year no matter who you are. So I think that's really disappointed for them. It looked like they were maybe going to turn a corner in year 3 under Lane Kiffin, but Jackson Dart just hasn't quite been the guy that they needed him to be this year. That's the bottom line. So they can at least salvage a season with a rivalry win this weekend. But other than that, I think it's been a little bit of a disappointment this season.
At 20, we got UCLA coming off a heartbreaker to USC at home. And the defense, they were great in the first quarter, didn't let USC score. And we're thinking, okay, UCLA might actually run away with this game. And then the second quarter started, and they let them score on 8 of the 9 drives they had for the rest of the game. And Caleb Williams just essentially took over. But if you're going to look back at this one, you got to look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Excellent game, but the only thing was the 3 interceptions, and they were mind-boggling interceptions right before half, one that clearly he shouldn't have thrown. In just boneheaded plays, it resulted in UCLA, not getting the win, and their Pac-12 title chances are more than likely over at this one. And I thought this team, really could pull it out at home. They almost did, but unfortunately, USC showed their strength late.
All right, 19, North Carolina takes a big drop. Really head-scratching loss for them, losing at home to Georgia Tech, a team who was really a bottom feeder in the ACC. They're still in the ACC championship against Clemson, but their very slim playoff chances are gone now. They have no shot at that. So this week they do get a rivalry game against NC State where they could get to 10 wins. That'd be a big boost to this program, but I think that's a really disappointing loss because uh, they were looking like a really good team and a team that could compete with Clemson in that ACC championship. Now I'm not so sure.
18, we got Cincinnati moving up one over their win in Temple. And now they're going to get Tulane, who you'll see next slide. And it's going to be a battle of, who wants it more for this game, because Tulane, if they win, they will be playing Cincinnati yet again in the American Championship. So they'll be playing twice in 2 weeks. But if Cincinnati can win this game, more than likely it'll be, who is it? Is it UCF? Yeah, UCF. So we're gonna have to see how the Cincinnati can handle the pressure. But Ben Bryant obviously left with an injury, so they had to go with the backup. So we're gonna have to monitor his situation going into this matchup. And Cincinnati, obviously it's not a performance like last year, 11-0, playing Alabama on 13-0 and whatnot. But hey, the Bearcats are still having another successful year under Luke Fickell.
At 17, we have Tulane bouncing back from that UCF loss by just thrashing SMU, a team who was playing pretty well in the American. So that's a really big win where they can build some momentum. And like you said, this week they have a chance to get to the American Championship. And in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever seen Tulane play for a conference championship. So that would be their best season in a really long time if they could make it happen. This offense is really clicking right now. So I think they're getting this big road game at a perfect time coming off that really good performance. So we'll see if they can get it done.
Then at 16, we got Florida State moving up a lot, just in part too, you saw some teams falling. And they get Florida, obviously, this week in a big rivalry game for them. The run game really showed up for the 6th time in a row. 200 rushing yards in the 6th game in a row is a lot. And I know even the NFL, that's unheard of. But college, I mean, it's starting to become less and less common for that to even happen as well. But they've won the last 4 games by 173-39, and Florida is on the ropes. And if this is the year that Florida State demolishes them, don't be too surprised because they got all the pieces right now. This team looked good in September, struggled once they lost to Wake Forest for a few weeks, and then really found their groove again, winning 4 in a row. And I expect it to be 5 in a row after this Florida game.
At 15, we have Kansas State. Really good road win where they put up another huge number. This offense has been really clicking this year when they're healthy. And right now, they are as healthy as they could have wanted to be. Will Howard continues to have really strong performances at quarterback. And this week, I would say they might be looking ahead to the Big 12 championship and get tripped up, but it's a rivalry game. So I don't think there's going to be any of that going on. I think they really want to beat this Kansas team. And if they can do that, they'll get their rematch with TCU. And that's a game that they had control of before both of their quarterbacks got knocked out. So I think they've really been wanting that rematch, and they'll have revenge on their mind for sure.
14, we got Notre Dame moving up a ton. And this is their highest ranking they've had since they, had the preseason ranking at 6 for us. And now this is the time to play spoiler and to really maybe even sneak into a New Year's 6 bowl game as well. If this Notre Dame team can go into USC, get a win, and limit Caleb Williams, they probably are going to be a top 10 team next week with 3 losses. So expect a very good game this week. Obviously Notre Dame has won 5 in a row and 8 of their last 9. So they started very rough, and Drew Pine is going to have his best game of the year against USC. And, it won't be hard because USC's defense is awful. Lots of points always get scored. So if he can, I think, throw for at least 3 touchdowns and put up 200 yards, and the ground game still controls the line of scrimmage, and Notre Dame's offensive line can, control the trenches, don't be too surprised if the Fighting Irish do pull off the upset, because we've seen Utah, they did it to USC, and they had excellent ground game. It could be another repeat for disaster for USC.
And at 13, we have those Utah Utes. They actually don't move at all. It's a tough road game for them, and they only lose by 3 at Oregon. So I think that's not really anything to knock them for. But unfortunately, their Pac-12 chances are gone now. They are officially eliminated from contention for the Pac-12 championship. But they still have a chance to beat Colorado. And then if they can win their bowl game, it'd be a 10-win season, which is always something to celebrate. So I think there's still a lot to play for here for Utah. Just I guess, a disappointing performance for Cameron Rising, who was really finding himself going into that game. But if they can get this win, then they'll have a bowl game to look forward to, and they'll have another strong season if they can win it.
At 12, we got Washington, who just beat those Colorado Buffaloes by almost 1,000,000 points, it felt like. Washington, they've been a very surprisingly good team this year. Once we saw Michigan State, they lost to Washington. We're thinking, oh, okay, Washington is pretty solid and Michigan State is awful. And, that was pretty much right. Once we had that prediction, what was that, week 3, week 4, very early in the season. Since that point, Washington's 9-2. They've lost 2 conference games, which has hurt their chances. Michael Penix Jr. has had great games, and then the 2 games he lost, he's had bad games. So Washington, I expect them to win the Apple Cup this week against Washington State and possibly even get a top 10 ranking.
All right, falling to number 11 is Tennessee. Probably the most shocking result, not only of this week, but one of the most shocking results of the season, really. I mean, Tennessee was in the playoff, no question. All they had to do was beat South Carolina and Vanderbilt. You could have almost wrote them down in Sharpie as being one of the 4 teams, but they just got ran off the field. I know Hendon Hooker went down, but it was already an 18-point deficit. They weren't going to come back at that point, even if he was healthy. And they give up 600 yards to an average at best offense in South Carolina, made Spencer Rattler look like the second coming of Patrick Mahomes. It was just ugly all around. And now Hooker has a torn ACL, so he's out for the year. So this Vanderbilt game suddenly looks like a winnable game for the Commodores. So it's everything on the table right now for Tennessee, and they need to get this win Saturday to still salvage a really good season.
Starting our top 10, we got Penn State jumping back in. And, I'm going to say it again like I did last week. If this Penn State team is in Pac-12, ACC, Big 12, and maybe even the SEC, I think they're 10-1 at worst. It's tough when you face Ohio State and Michigan, 2 and 3, which consensus pretty much in our rankings every week. And you lose those, but you beat everyone else pretty good in every single game. You got to be a very good team. And, they beat Rutgers for the 16th time in a row. Katron Allen had a good game. Clifford, mediocre at best. Now you get Michigan State at home, and more than likely they're going to finish at least 10-2 before their bowl game. So these Nittany Lions are just essentially 1 win away from being in the college football playoff conversation every year. And maybe next year can be that year for them.
All right, at number 9, we have Oregon. Another big win for the Ducks. They've had a couple this year, and a team that I think is really going to be thinking about that Washington loss when it's all said and done, because I would not be surprised if they not only get through Oregon State, but if they beat USC in the Pac-12 championship. And obviously, if that happens, and if they did beat Washington, they would be in the playoffs. So I think it's going to be a season of the what if for Oregon. But that is going to be a tough road game. Obviously, that's a really heated rivalry there, the Civil War, they call it. So I think that's no gimme going on the road. But if they can get through that, I think they have a really good chance to win the Pac-12. So still a lot to play for here for Oregon.
At 8, we got Alabama staying put. A cupcake game this week. I hate how you only have to play 8 games in the SEC. for
Well,
conference. So they need to change that real quick. But this one was more on Jace McClellan. Obviously had a good game. Bryce Young had another good game. It's nothing too spectacular. Didn't really open the playbook in this one. Kind of stuck to themselves, did what they had to do. But we saw last year, playing in Auburn, a game they more than likely should have lost. And this year, I know it's at home, but it is the Iron Bowl, and stranger things have happened. Seems like more of the upsets come at Auburn, but maybe this is the year Auburn turns the tides. They have been bad this year, that's to say the least, but they were not the best last year at all either. And they almost beat Alabama. So I don't think it's going to be as big of a blowout as, the spread says. So I'm definitely taking the Auburn spread in this one, but outright, I mean, it's hard to bet against Alabama. So expect the, Crimson Tide to finish 10-2 before their bowl game, and most likely a New Year's Six game.
and at number 7, we have Clemson. I thought it was a really impressive win. You haven't said that too often about Clemson, but I think Miami still does have a lot of talent there, and Clemson really blew them out, and that's what they need to do going forward. They have a chance this week, a chance that we didn't think they would have to get a quality win after South Carolina dismantled Tennessee. If they could really dominate South Carolina, maybe win by at least 20, they need all of those style points if they're going to make the playoff, because I think if teams don't lose in front of them, they're going to need to just run over South Carolina and then North Carolina to even give themselves a chance. But I think if USC loses, then this team, if they can get to 12-1, they're going to have a really strong argument to get into the playoff. So they just have to win their last 2 games.
Then at 6, we got LSU moving up one. Another cupcake game for the SEC as LSU dominates. They play Georgia in the SEC championship here in 2 weeks. They should absolutely throttle Texas A&M. Daniel should have another good game. And, their big storyline isn't even this week. It's Georgia. Can they beat Georgia and possibly be the first two-loss team ever into the college football playoff? That's what they're going for right now. And if you really want to think about it, personally, I think they're a 10-1 team because I'm not looking at that Florida State game because one, well, you lost on an extra point and extra point. I mean, come on, that game could have flipped. Would have went to another overtime. LSU could have won. Blah blah blah. The what if scenario. But either way, Florida State is still a very good team. Obviously, they are in our rankings, so you got to give them credit for being where they're at. LSU, they don't have a really bad loss this year, obviously, and they're here at 6, and don't expect them, to be out of the conversation just yet. But before we get into that, we got to see who's at 5.
And at 5, we have USC winning a absolute thriller over UCLA. The defense has been non-existent for most games this year, but luckily they have Caleb Williams, they have Jordan Addison, they have a dominant offense. So the offense has been able to carry them to 10 wins in 11 games, and that gets you to number 5. So this week they have Notre Dame. I think that's going to be a really interesting game to watch. Notre Dame has a great offensive line, and going against USC's bad defense, I think they're going to try and just control the time of possession. So I think USC is going to have to limit that, or they could get upset even playing at home. I think Notre Dame has really been finding themselves, and that's a dangerous game for USC. And even if they can win that, they have to play Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. So 2 really tough games, and if they win those, they will definitely earn themselves a spot in the playoff.
And starting at 4, we have TCU, and obviously you got to talk about the game-winning field goal with 14 seconds left, bringing the unit on, kicking that field goal, on the road, to say the least, is a tough thing to do. This is their best start since 2010, and they're the first team in Big 12 history to start 11-0 in college football playoff history. But they got that Big 12 title game. It's either Kansas or Texas, and I think that's a bad match, or Kansas State or Texas, and I think that's a bad matchup for TCU because both of those teams played them to the wire, and TCU escaped, and now it's going to be a neutral site game. That is in bad juju for the Horned Frogs, and if they lose this week, obviously in my mind they're done. Doesn't matter if they win the Big 12 championship because this will be an ugly loss. But let's say they're 12-0 facing Kansas State or Texas. You lose that game, I don't think you're in. Even if Clemson loses, Obviously, Michigan Ohio State loser, I think, has the advantage over TCU, in my opinion, just because it's a better loss. But, obviously, that's a few weeks away. We're going to have to come back in 2 weeks to see what we're going to think about that. But it's going to come down to Max Duggan, how he's going to play in that game. But, we're already overlooking this Iowa State game because, well, they should absolutely throttle them, right? And, that's when college football gets you. So, more than likely, just because we're saying all this and we're super confident in it, Iowa State is probably going to win.
All right, at number 3, we have the Michigan Wolverines. Really struggled with Illinois. I know they had a lot of guys out. I think they're missing 5 or 6 starters. Either way, that should be a game where they're just putting them away. It should not have come down to that game-winning field goal, but thank God for Jake Moody, the best kicker in the country, no question about it. He gets the job done, going 4 for 4. In Michigan, they got the win. That's all that matters. They're going to Columbus at 11-0. That was the goal at the start of the season. So now it comes down to the game, which everyone's going to be tuned in for. Game day, big noon. They're all going to be there. So I think this is the biggest game of the season so far. Once you bring the rivalry aspect into it, and obviously the biggest question for Michigan is whether Blake Corum is going to be able to go against Ohio State. They were also without their backup running back Donovan Edwards against Illinois. So if neither of them can play, even with my bias involved, it's very difficult to see a path towards victory for Michigan. So they're going to need them. They're going to need all hands on deck for this big matchup.
And at 2, we got those Buckeyes scraping by Maryland. The 43 is a gift, essentially. It was, 36-30 with like 30 seconds left. They kicked the field goal to make it that, and then they get the fumble, touchdown. Tagovailoa gets hurt. I think it was a trap game for both Ohio State and Michigan because both of the teams are pretty solid teams the week before, the game. But you got to look at the running back room, and Dallin Hayden, the guy out of nowhere, just decides to pop off. The third string running back, he's behind Trayvon Henderson. Obviously, they're clear-cut number 1. And what's the other? Williams,
yeah.
Tyron, yeah, Williams. So he had a great game, and that just scares me even more as a Michigan fan because you could have all 3 healthy, and they could just rotate them in and out and have a huge play at any time. So we're going to have to see how that goes. And Ohio State, obviously, with C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a tough combo to stop. But if somehow, some way, Michigan can find a way to stop those 2 and limit, I guess you could say, Ohio State's run game like they did last year, then maybe Michigan does find a way to win. But, as you said, it's all going to come down to Corum and Edwards' health. Because if they don't have that, then more than likely this Michigan team doesn't stand a chance. And that's my, unbiased opinion. I don't think that Ohio State is going to have a problem with Michigan if that happens. But we're going to have to see.
And number 1, we have Georgia. I didn't watch this game, but obviously a little bit of a struggle there, only winning 16-6. I think this team is just kind of in coast mode right now. I mean, they had Kentucky and Georgia Tech. They clinched the East in week 10 of the college football season. So essentially playing 2 warm-up games for that SEC championship. This week they get Georgia Tech, who did get a big win last week, but let's be real, this won't be a close game. And it's going to be Georgia and LSU. And, I think even if Georgia loses that game, they'll still be comfortably in the playoff. And they've earned that. They have dominated pretty much every game this year that they've needed to. So as long as they take care of business this Saturday, you can mark them in the college football playoff for sure.
That's going to be it for our video today. Make sure you guys come back next week to see our rankings, where we got Ohio State and Michigan, especially after the big game this week. So hit that subscribe button to be notified of our video next week. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.
She never called back.